Good morning, everybody. How's everyone? How has been your week? Since the last time we met last Friday for Shavuot, I had promised each one of you all that I'll do a small recording on Megillat Ruth, right? On the story of Ruth. So I was trying to put together and combining a small study, just a basic principles and understandings of, you know, of the underlining what the Torah is actually telling us. So this morning I got up early and I said, I was really moved to make this recording. Although I'd written the script and I'd completed it last night, I said I'll get together this morning and give it to you all. Now, following from what we kind of studied last week, and if you all have internalized and if you all have seen the script of, I think you all have all read the script of Shavuot, which we put out on the blog. But let's comprehend what this day of Shavuot was all about. Okay. And then while we were studying, we cantered through the story of Megillat. Now the word Megillah means scroll, right, in Hebrew, which is read every year in Israel and among the Jewish people every year on Pentecost. Because the Jewish people have a very clear understanding that the ingathering of the Gentiles is very, very important to the Jewish people. It's a concept that has always been there among the diaspora of the Jewish nation, right? It's not very New Testament, or it's not that we make ourselves important by saying, okay, we are Gentiles and we need to graft ourselves in. It's always been there within the storyline of the Torah and the engrafting of the Gentiles for 3,500, 4,000 years. And then we've seen about the barley harvest and what this barley harvest is all about. And we read through a brief story of Naomi and her husband Elimelech, who leaves their hometown in Yehuda, in Judah of Israel, and with their two sons, Machlon and Kilion. Very interesting names, right? And how they leave and they go into Moab. And when they go into Moab, their two sons intermarry with Moabite women. So who are these Moabite women now? Orpah and Ruth. These two women who are Moabites are descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew. Okay, so keep this in mind. So there's some kind of integration or reintegration which is happening in the storyline. Now, before we go ahead, I want you to understand, as I've said before, that the foundation of the Torah is based on kindness, compassion, and justice. It's very, very important to understand this. Without a clear understanding of kindness and compassion and justice, we will understand nothing in the scriptures. And everything that we read in the scripture must have strong elements of these attributes in every story and in every person and in every name that we read in the Torah. Otherwise, you know what? It's just going to be a storyline. In fact, there's not going to be a storyline. It's just going to be a storyboard. And we'll be just picking up fragmented episodes of people and stories all over the place and bringing it together and forming our own theological storyline. But that's not what's happening. So there is a historical event in the Torah, but behind that historical event, we must look deeper, we must look further, we must understand what is actually happening, not only in the spiritual realm, but a realm of spirit that is mixed with this earthly realm. There is a special realm, that soul realm that drives humanity. And that's what we're going to look at. And that comes out in the attributes and the characteristics of people in the Bible, in the scriptures. If we look at the Bible from a moral point of view, we're going to get lost. You will find many, many instances in the Bible that seem ridiculous, seem immoral, seem like illogical, and that should not be there. But I want you to understand, everything that happens in the Bible, it's not condoned by God. It's not that God has said, okay, it's okay. God may not have liked what has happened, but God uses those situations to convert them from darkness into light, to bring fruit out of everything that has happened. So, no matter where humanity goes, what humanity does, God is able to take the situation out and change it into a blessing. Okay, keep this in mind. So, we may stumble across many stories in the Bible that are not very fruitful, or they put a big question mark. But keep this in mind. Whatever humanity does, God does not interfere. But He takes that situation and turns it around from a curse and makes it into a blessing and gives it back to us. So it is in the book of Ruth. What is happening in the book of Ruth? We read a very simple story. It's not an amazing story. We just read about Machlon and Kilion, and Elimelech dies, and the two sons die, and the two widows are left with their mother-in-law. And now Naomi says, I'm alone. I need to get back to the land of Yehuda. So she calls her two daughters and says, Orpah, Ruth, please go back. You all do not belong to where I belong. Go back, you all are young, find husbands for yourself and live a good life. Orpah takes her advice and says, okay, I'll go. But Ruth says something different. Now, Ruth attaches herself to her mother-in-law Naomi, because there is a bond. There's a very special bond which is formed. And there's something very important about Ruth. And I said last time, the name Ruth, if you reverse it, it comes from the word tor, which means a dove, but not a turtle dove. Okay. The word tor, it means a palm dove. It's a very special dove you find in Israel who lives only on the palm tree, from where we get the word Torah, okay, instructions. So, kindness, justice, and compassion. What is this all about? Let's move on. And you'll understand why I slice in compassion and kindness into the story. Because this precedent of these attributes, which God has given every humanity and every human, is in deeply involved in the Torah and in every person's life, of every person in the Torah. And it repeats itself all through the Torah. Let's see what we're talking about. Now, Ruth was from the descendant of Lot, okay, from a Moabite. Now, Lot had two sons, right? One was Moab, and the other one was Ammon. So Ammon, actually, it's the modern day city of Amman comes from Ammon. Just for your information. While Moab is pretty ancient, it's still that part of the present day Jordan country, but it's still a hill country in the Jordan area. And the word Moab means Mo-av, from the father. So you all know what the two daughters done to the father, right? Got him drunk and they slept with the father and they brought 4 children. So God never condoned this. God never agreed to what these two done. But wherever, as far as they went in iniquity, in the book of Ruth, we see a rectification from the side of Lot coming back and getting grafted back into the covenant of Avraham. Very, very important. Now, Ruth goes on to marry Boaz. And this seems a very small, simple story. But if you're reading it very carefully, it's very scandalous. Because it says very clearly that Ruth actually went in the night and slept next to Boaz. And the language which is mentioned out there is very significant, because it actually says that Boaz was, he erupted. He kind of, it affected him. So there was probably something which happened between Boaz and Ruth that night. And to avoid a very scandalous incident, Boaz takes up the gauntlet and he says, okay, I need to understand what's happening with Ruth out here. And ultimately they get married and they have children. And this lineage comes right up to King David, who is the great-grandson of Ruth. Okay. So keeping in line with this lineage that's emerging because of this grafting in and bringing together one family, this one family which is coming in now. So when you look at the family line of Avraham, right from Terah, who had 3 sons, Nahor, Haran, and Avraham. Okay, Haran dies, okay, and Lot, that got separated from Avraham, now finally is coming back through his daughters and through his children, coming back to Avraham and coming back into this promise of Avraham. So it's very interesting to look, wherever we go in life, uh, wherever our children wander or generations wander, and if they are special in the sight of God, if at some point of time in their lives, they have attributed their lives to God, it may take one generation, 2 generations, but for sure, God knows how to engraft you back again into that promise. And this is a tremendous hope in our lives. Keep this in mind, friends. So let's reflect. Where have we read this story which looks very similar in the Torah before? We always need to ask ourselves this question. This story reflects on another person. The other person is Avraham. Very important to understand. Now, see, Ruth is not born Jewish, but has grafted herself in. The question is why? Why does she want to graft herself in? She does not give us the answer, but the answer lies with Boaz. Because Boaz is seeing something important in Ruth. Boaz is looking at things that you and me would not look at. So see what he says actually. Boaz says, okay, when he talks to Ruth, and for the first time when he sees Ruth, he says, I've heard about you and what you've done for your mother-in-law. After your husband died, you took care of her. It was a great kindness. Look at the words of Boaz. What's he saying out here? He's looking at something in Ruth, and this something is kindness. Later on, he even looks at Ruth in such a way that Ruth is not tempted with the infirmities of the flesh, but she's more value driven, she's more culture driven, she's more driven and by a spiritual angle rather than a physical angle. Now Ruth, being a young girl, could have gone and got any man in the field, attached to herself to any young man, and got married and taken her life forward. But she never chose to do that. What did she chose to do? She chose to come to Boaz, who probably was much older than her, a lot more matured, wealthy, and to graft herself into Boaz because she has learned something living with Naomi. She has learned something about the Jewish life. She understands that, giving into youth and giving into flesh and giving into the world, she's not interested in. She's interested in doing something and doing the things right in her life. So typically, all young people have a choice in life today. They either follow the world, follow the lust of the flesh, follow what the eyes want, follow what their heart wants, do whatever they want to do in life. But to do the right thing, like Ruth, is extremely important. It takes courage, it takes character, it takes tremendous values in a person to make these kind of decisions. And this is what was exemplified by Ruth. So when she attached herself to Naomi, there was a kindness inside of her. That my mother-in-law is old. I do not belong to my family now, but I belong to Naomi. I belong to the family that I'm married into. So she stuck and she completed her course. She said, I am going to look after because this is my new family now. And that kindness and that commitment was something that Boaz seen. So he says, later on, he says, how did you choose me rather than choosing a young man? And as this kind of act of loyalty to her dead husband, so she's still committed to her husband because her husband's dead. Okay, her husband is dead, but yet she's committed to the family. Very, very important. Now, I want you to understand, in those days, family was very, very important. And it should be also even till today. Family is very, very important. Okay, we will see this as we go down. Now, let's look at Avraham, and let's look at Ruth. These two personalities, how do they match in their lives and in the character? You see, Avraham was not born Jew. He became a Jewish soul. So did Ruth. She grafted herself into the Jewish covenant, into a Jewish house. Avraham leaves his father and his mother, leaves his land. So does Ruth. Avraham is known for his kindness and hospitality and a sense of justice. So does Ruth. Ruth never strays, but she shows kindness to her mother-in-law and compassion for her. And she has a sense of justice, of tzedek, of being a righteous person. And therefore she approaches Ruth in righteousness, not in an immoral way altogether. It may look very immoral, but she approaches with a sense of righteousness that what she's doing is for the sake of compassion and kindness, and also to build the family of Naomi. Because Naomi now is devoid of family. Okay, there is no inheritance, there is no legacy. Her two sons have died, and she's going to die without any legacy and inheritance. And God does not like that. Why does God not like that? Because family is very important to God. Extremely important. Because of this one act of compassion and kindness that Ruth has shown, the lineage that comes from Ruth and Boaz now finally ends up with King David, because King David's a great grandson. And the lineage of King David is come down right till our Lord Jesus, Yeshua. Okay, it's a tremendous story, my friends. So we are reading so many things about who done this and who done that and what they gave and who said and what said. Leave all that aside. Look at the person. Look at the value of the person. Look at Ruth. What is so interesting about Ruth? You know what? Kindness, compassion, and a sense of being a tzaddik, justice. Very, very important. Okay, let's move a little ahead. From where does this kindness angle actually come in now? We've seen how Ruth is driven by this kindness. But how does this kindness play out in the story? Now, there is a commandment in the Torah about a thing called yibum. What is yibum? It's translated in the English Bible and in the Christian circle as the Levirate marriage, Levirate marriage. And the Levirate marriage was a very strange custom that was probably pre-existent even before the Torah was given. So we're still talking about, the time when Judah and Ruth, these people lived. And this is even before the Torah is given on Mount Sinai. So before the Torah is given on Mount Sinai, this practice of Yibum existed even then. So what is this Yibum about? This Yibum is about, if a family had many children, many sons, and all of them were married, and by chance one of those brothers die young without actually producing seed or giving birth to a son or a daughter, what happens was one of the brothers will come in and fill in his shoes. That means he will take the widow of his brother as his wife, and he will give her seed. He will give her a son or a daughter or a child. But the child that comes forth from that marriage, he will marry her. It's not that he's going to cohabit or live with her. He will marry her. He will marry his dead brother's wife. And the child that comes from that union will not be his. It will be the child of his dead brother. That child will carry on the legacy, the lineage, and the inheritance of that dead brother. So that comfort will come to that widow. Because that widow needs to have something to live for. Understand the implications of what the Torah is telling us. So he would step in for this role, give that child to her, be a support to that widow, let the child grow up, and then he would hand over that thing, and that legacy of that dead brother would carry on. So this is purely an act of, kindness, compassion, and to bring together the family and keep the inheritance of the family going. Now, this may seem very illogical and immoral in today's age, right? But if you look at this very carefully, it is a way that the ancients of people have kept their families together. The inheritance, the wealth, moreover, their lifestyle, and especially the guarding of the Torah, more than anything else. If the Torah remained in the family unit and it was guarded by the family unit, it was good. But by chance, any of these things ever happened in the family unit, and none of the brothers would want to take responsibility of that widow, I want you to think what would happen to that widow, especially if she was young. What would happen? She would leave the family, she would go out into this world, and the legacy of that dead brother would be dead. One. Two is, she would spoil herself via impurity. She would go into the world and contract all the impurities, and yet she would somehow be connected to the family, and that would bring the family into a kind of impure condition and would cause conflict within the family and probably fights and immorality, and all these things would happen. So to avoid this, the Levirate, the Yibum, was set up in the Old Testament to keep the family together. See, God is very important and is very interested in the family. If there's any evil out in this world today, if the world is degenerate, if the world is bad and evil and corrupt and crooked and cruel, and if the world is breaking down, it is because the family unit has broken down first. The family unit has broken down first. So the Bible does not encourage that every brother sleeps with every sister-in-law. That's not what the Bible is encouraging. The Bible is encouraging a person to dig deep into herself and find the roots of compassion and kindness and to guard another human being. Don't let a woman go astray. And why should not a woman go astray? According to the Bible, a woman should either be in her father's house or under the covering of her husband. Either the covering of a father or either the covering of the husband. It's very important. Not because the man is better than the woman. That's not what the Bible is telling us. It is because of how God has made the woman and how God has made the man. Understand, the man is being created to give or to throw out. The woman is made like a sponge to receive in and to absorb. So at all points of time in the life of a woman, she needs to be protected, because a woman can get contaminated by impurities faster than a man. Not that a man does not have impurities, has tremendous impurities. But when a man gets impure, and if he sleeps with a woman, the woman absorbs all those impurities from a man like a sponge. Therefore, when the woman gets impure, a man does not have a good life. The marriage is over. It's on the rocks. So we are dealing with many, many foundational and many, many levels of family life out here. So Yibum was practiced as a corrective course measure in the Bible, and God had told them, allowed them to practice Yibum only for one reason, that the purity of the woman, of the widow, remains within the family. Minimum impurity that remains within the family. If the woman has to go out, finish. The family is over, and the legacy of that family is over. So that's what Yibum is about. Where else have you seen this case of Yibum in the Old Testament, especially in the life of Avraham? Now, when we read Avraham, he married Sarai. Who was Sarai? Sarai was Lot's sister, nephew, and niece. He married his own niece. Sarai was a daughter of Haran, sorry. Okay, because when Haran died, he left Milcah, Sarah, and Lot. And now two brothers, that is uh, Nahor and Avraham. They come together and they take control of the dead brother's family. Dead brother's family. So one marries the niece, the other one marries a niece, and Avram says, Lot, you come with me, I take the responsibility of you like a father to a son. And then Avram leaves with his niece, who he marries, Sarai, and Lot, and he moves to the land of Canaan. What is this all about? Avram could have said, Sarai, you're young, find a young man, get married, go make a home for yourself. Lord, you can go yourself. I'm going. God has called me in my journey, so I'm going on my own. I'm not interested in your lives. That's not what Avraham done, my friends. He had compassion, and this kindness took spiritual responsibility for these two people. Therefore, the relationship with Avraham and with Sarai, I want you to look at it in a very different angle altogether. Although Sarai was his wife, who he married out of compulsion of compassion and kindness to keep that family purity, taharot. Right? Remember, we said family purity we had studied 2 weeks ago. To keep that alive, he got Sarai. So his relationship with Sarai was very different to his relationship with any other woman. Now, Avraham had many other concubines out there. The Bible says that. Because after Sarai died, now finally Avraham was free to remarry, and then he remarried another woman, Keturah, and he had many, many children from Keturah. So finally, Avraham was free to live and to marry and to love whoever he wanted. But as long as Sarai was alive, he had a role and a responsibility to keep Sarai and to keep her in spiritual purity and to cover her and to make her ready and prepared to bring in the seed of promise, that was Isaac. So I want you to understand the laws of Yibum. It's very, very important. It's all based out of kindness and compassion. This is why, when we read the Torah, there are many levels. One is the literal level, the Pashat level, which we studied before. Then there is also another level that's giving you, the remes, the parables. Then the other level is the Midrash. Now what we're studying is the Midrash, to understand what the story is actually telling us. Far beyond actions, deeds, people are doing, there is something else. It's talking about the human condition, the human soul out here, how honorable we are. So what is the need of Avram to do this kindness with his niece and his nephew? It's all about keeping that family purity, friends, and to keeping the family unit together. Please understand this. Now, if you look at very carefully, Nahor, marries Milcah, and from Milcah you have Laban and you have Rivka, right? Yitzhak marries Rebecca, Milcah's daughter. So the rectification from Nahor now comes through Yitzhak and his daughter Rivka. But generations down the line, the rectification of Lot, which is Haran's seed, we see Nahor's seed rectified and come and grafted in. Now Haran's seed needs to be grafted in by way of Lot's daughters and generation, that is Ruth, now is grafted in. And this grafting in, because of the act of what Avraham done, now Haran is grafted in, the lineage of Haran is grafted in through Ruth and brought back into the covenant that God gave Avraham. So, why didn't God choose Nahor? He could have chosen, because Nahor done the same act of kindness. Nahor done the same act of kindness. But he never chose Avraham. Nahor at that point of time. He chose Avraham because Avraham had something different in him. Avraham was chosen for a role, a different role altogether. So, friends, in today's context of life, I know we do not fit into the laws of Yibum. This world will never fit into the laws of Yibum. It's not possible. Why? Because we're not honorable people. We are not the kind of people that were like Avraham and Ruth and Sarai. There is no honor and there is no commitment. There is no compassion and kindness in all of us. These people were driven by tremendous spiritual compassion and kindness. Their lives were much more simpler. We as a species, as humans, have moved on. We've become very complex species, complex. And the more complex we've made ourselves, the more laws that we need and commandments that we need to keep ourselves in check. I'll tell you why. Listen, understand this. Suppose we live in a country that does not require policing. So you just remove all the police from the country and from the cities. Just remove them. What would our life be? Do you think you will be safe? Would you leave your house in safety and come back in safety? Not a chance. Because inherently people are bad. When people realize that there is no policing and no one to tell us and there's no law above us, there will be murder, rioting, looting, everything going on in the streets. Why do we need the police? To keep law and order. We have made a statute in our country, or in all countries, that there has to be law and order. Therefore, we appoint judges and law enforcers and policemen and overseers to keep us in check. Why? Because we as a species are inherently bad. We're not honorable anymore. If you go to a person and say, dude, I'm not going to harm you. I'm not going to rob you. Would you trust me? No one trusts each other anymore, my friends. So therefore, we are not like the olden days people. We are a very complex culture right now. All humans are very complex cultures. So therefore, as and when we grew and we became a complex species, God adapted and put into us values that tell us from inside, don't do this and don't do that, and don't do this and don't do that. This is good and this is bad, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable. So the more we became a complex species, the more laws were put in place. God filtered down laws through each one of us to safeguard our own values and safeguard our own lives. This is the world that we live in. Hid behind so many laws and rules and regulations and policies and guidelines and court systems and justice systems. And if all this is removed, the worst of humanity will come out. Therefore, if you look at our lives, when last did we have a moment of compassion and kindness in our life? Not the small things I'm talking about. I'm talking about a moment in your life that has actually affected a big change in a person's life, in another person's life. It is the foundation of entering into the kingdom. The New Testament says that when Jesus seen the dead, the lepers, the sick, the blind, the lame, and every time he done a miracle because he had kindness and compassion that led him to do miracles. It's not that he went out doing miracles because he wanted to do miracles. It was kindness and compassion that compelled him to perform these miracles. I'm still saying, if it was possible for Jesus to do not a single miracle, he would have been very happy not to do it. He would have been very happy not to do it. The reason he done it because of kindness and compassion. And that is a driving force. That's the foundation of our kingdom and our entry into the kingdom. So what I'm trying to say is this: to enter into the kingdom and graft ourselves into the covenant that God has made with Avraham, and even to be born again, to enter into faith through Yeshua, that is a simple precondition. we must have compassion and kindness. And having compassion and kindness makes us humble with humility. Then only we are able to graft ourselves into the kingdom. Bring ourselves to the point, say, Lord Jesus, please accept me. Without kindness and compassion and love, you are nothing. You will never be able to enter into this kingdom. It is this attribute that brought Ruth in. She was able to graft herself into the Jewish nation into the tribe of Judah, Yehuda. But more important, her lineage from Lot now is rectified. So there is salvation, there is grafting in, but there's also an angle of rectification of this thing. So friends, in our lives, in our family lives, in everything that we're doing on a daily basis, understand, more than anything else, there is also a rectification which is required in our lives. This rectification is very, very, very important. We have to come to a point where rectification, when you look deeply, reflective, and look deep inside each one of us, and we see that this is wrong and that is wrong, and this is the way I've been harmed, and this is what this person done to me. I have no contact with that person. And sometimes you feel overwhelming grief inside of you in your quiet time, and you say, I wish this never happened to me, and I wish this never happened to me. That rectification is very important, friends. Extremely important. So look carefully. Understand what Ruth stands for. About the grafting in, about the rectification of a legacy, of inheritance, of a lineage. Look at Yibum. Study what Yibum is all about. It's not it may sound as an immoral act, but there's far greater consequences to it. I was talking to some of my close friends one day, and we spoke about many things, even about surrogacy and about having children and surrogacy for childless couples and all this. If it's done the natural way, I think it's great value in the sight of God. A life is a life. And if you're able to give kindness and a child to somebody else, a couple, a man and a woman only, I think it's great in the sight of God. It's complete compassion and kindness. Okay. That's the most we can do in at least accomplishing Yibum. But we have to be very careful in today's world, because God has put many restrictions on humanity now. And as we're progressing and as we're becoming more and more bad, God is curtailing, chipping off one feather, slowly. And He's bound us in all these laws and observances and rules and regulations and kanuns and all this stuff put together. Because we are not honorable people. So friends, Ruth has something else to learn from. It's not only about traditionally, grafting in the Gentiles into the church. It's not about that. It's about something else. We're talking about a different level altogether. We're talking about a deeper level of understanding who we are, what we need to be like. Okay. So from last time till now, we've studied so many angles about Shavuot, about Pentecost, so many angles. And I hope you're internalizing everything that we're learning. Okay. Today's a short message, a short video for all of y'all. I'll meet you all on Friday. Take care. God bless. And study the book of Ruth properly in what we studied. Wonderful. Have a lovely day. Kavrim. God bless.